I know that each smallest particle of consciousness can never be broken down, and that each contains an infinite capability for the creativity and development, and that each is innately blessed. There is a design and a designer, but they are so combined, the one within and the one without, that it is impossible to separate them. The Creator is also within its creation, and the creations themselves are gifted with creativity. Break. When you ask about the beginning of a universe, you are speaking of a visible universe. There is consciousness within each conceivable hypothetical point within the universe. There is therefore, an invisible universe, out of which the visible or objective universe springs. Break. Your universe did not emerge at any one point, therefore, or with any one initial call, but everywhere it began to exist at once. As the inner pulsations of the invisible universe reached certain intensities that, impregnated the entire physical system simultaneously. In this case, first of all light appeared. At the same time, EU units became manifest, impinging from the invisible universe into definition. Break. I have said, for example, that the universe expands as an idea does, and so the visible universe sprang into being in the same manner. The whole affair is quite complicated since, again, as I have indicated, the world freshly springs into new creativity at each moment. No matter what your version of creativity, or the creation of the world, you are stuck with the question of where such energy came from. For it seems that unimaginable energy was released more or less at one time, and that this energy must then run out. The same energy, however, still gives birth anew to the universe. In those terms, it is still being created. The EU units, impressing a probable physical field, contains within them the latent knowledge of all of the species that can emerge under those conditions. The groupings, being, in the invisible universe, you can say that it took untold centuries for the EU units, initially, to combine, form classifications of matter and various species, or you can say that this process happened at once. It is according to your relative position, but the physical universe was everywhere seated, impregnated, simultaneously. On the other hand, this is still happening, and there is no real, coming in point. Break. Your distinction between consciousness and your own version, which you consider consciousness of self. When I speak of atoms and molecules having consciousness, I mean that they possess a consciousness of themselves as identities. I do not mean that they love or hate in your terms, but they are aware of their own separateness and aware of the way in which that separateness cooperates to form other organizations. They are initially aware, in fact, of all such probable cooperative ventures, and embedded within the divine drive for value fulfillment. Every known species was inherently present within the overall impregnation of the visible universe then. Break. The motion and energy of the universe still comes from within. I certainly realize that this is hardly a scientific statement. Yet the moment all that is conceived of a physical universe, it was invisibly created, endowed with creativity, and bound to emerge. Because each hypothetical, conceivable portion of the universe is conscious. The planner is within the plan itself, and in the greatest terms, perhaps basically inconceivable to you. There is, of course, no outside into which the invisible universe materialized, since all does indeed exist in a mental, psychic, or spiritual realm quite impossible to describe. To you, your universe seems now objective and real, and it seems to you that at one time at least this was not the case, so you ask about its creation and the evolution of the species. My answer has been couched in the terms in which the question is generally asked. This covers much of the essence of metaphysics from the other side. The main theme is that there is an invisible underlying source to the universe and all things. Within this, we know the primary force is a consciousness I call all that is, and the purpose is to bring into being this unique experience we call physical life. In this, it is an experiment in the discovery of our unique consciousness and all others within this system of reality to create and become. Going through this text as given, we see a reference to purpose. The thing said first is there is not one purpose. Then it says we cannot be aware of all of consciousness's purposes. This falls in line with our limited focus and lack of deeper understanding of the underlying truth of our being, but that is with keeping in our explanation of this type of physically oriented ego consciousness, part of the rules of the game. Without this special focus, this reality and life would not be what it is for its experience. This is why not everyone will accept a metaphysical concept of our universe. They are in their own unique reality of their beliefs and focus within this physical system to the exclusion of their inner selves. And this is fine. There is no great rule for anyone to come to this understanding except for the reason of their own personal development if they have chosen that purpose within this life. Everyone is at their own level and involved in their own creative drama of life. What it says is consciousness is looking for its own nature through its own manifestations. So what is that nature? I have come to the conclusion it is to create. That may be a love affair, family, art, epic drama, tragedy, or even a war. These are our physical manifestations in one way or another, and all have their beginning on the metaphysical level as thoughts, desires, and emotions. When it comes to tell us there is design, it blends this into things designed. All it is the universe and all of its parts to include us. When we do something, it is our own choice. And since we are part of all that is, we are doing the designing on the level where human consciousness has its place. What has been said is that we are co-creators. Within our level means what we can do, and for man that is what we can imagine. We cannot turn off the sun, that's not within our level or ability yet, and belongs to the atoms that compose it, or even the creative force behind it. We can set off a nuclear weapon because we have developed that ability. These are our choices, and at our level we understand what we are doing. So we have this great freedom of individual choice, and what we choose is our plan, our design. We make our world because of our ability to do so. If you want to see God, look around. You cannot miss Him, even and especially by looking inside. Seth goes into the beginning of the universe and EE units. This aspect is important in that it tells us again that this certain intensity that had to be reached before what we conceive of our physical universe even became what it is to us now. It of course goes against the current theory of a Big Bang, and I have looked into both in a study of cosmology. Some of their theories are just as incredible to me as this may be to them. The last book I read was, quote, Ripples in Time, end quote, and focused on the background radiation of about 3 degrees Kelvin. They claim a nice picture and found what they wanted, but that is what they were trying to do. I will propose to you again my analogy of the shape of our universe. If you were in a dream and asked if a Big Bang created it, you may find proof that it did once you started looking, and it was what you already had in mind. But the fact is, the dream started and formed by your thoughts. That's as far into cosmology I will go, as the focus of this book is metaphysics. I will, however, here add this that Seth has to say about it. Dreams, Evolutions, and Value Fulfillment, Session 883. Quote, Divine subjectivity is indeed infinite. It can never be entirely objectified. When the worlds, yours and others, were thus created, there was indeed an explosion of unimaginable proportions, as the divine spark of inspiration exploded into objectivity. The first, quote, object was an almost unendurable mass, though it had no weight, and it exploded instantaneously, beginning the process that formed the universe. But no time was involved. The process that you might imagine took up eons occurred in the twinkling of an eye, and the initial objective materialization of the massive thought of all that is burst into reality. In your terms, this was a physical explosion. But in the terms of the consciousnesses involved in that breakthrough, this was experienced as a triumphant, quote, first, inspirational frenzy, a breakthrough into another kind of being. The earth then appeared as consciousness transformed itself into the many facets of nature. The atoms and molecules were alive, aware. They were no longer simply a part of a divine syntax, but they spoke themselves through the very nature of their being. They became the living, aware vowels and syllables through which consciousness could form matter." End quote. Back to the study of E units. One conclusion I cannot help but point out is that the same time light appeared, so did the E units. There is some relationship, as I stated earlier. Seth does not say E units are light, and I do not believe they are in that sense. I would more likely place them as incipient light or its metaphysical counterpart. This bit of information taken in context with the rest of what we know about the universe from this point may give us an answer. In his statement, Seth commented on the world springing into new creation at each moment. I will propose a theory of the operations of this that ties in the statement that thoughts, and hence E units, create matter. There are two views I will give at this point, and cannot give much more than the proofs I have already stated. In the first place, in keeping with this text, these units created all matter at the moment that the E units reached that certain point. In this it is only fair to ask where these E units emitted from. The answer to me is obviously all that is. The universe was thought of and came into existence by these means. The intensity has been mentioned numerous times, and when I first started my studies I placed them on a meaning of energy level. Later I further correlated this with the focus of our conscious. What I mean in this may be stated better in the way Seth speaks about our focus and other realities. If we are tuned to the specific frequency of physical matter. Now let us consider frequency instead of energy level, and as physicists know they are related or the same when discussing waves. In this, these E units that do not impinge into the physical universe are simply not within our frequency to perceive. I hope that you will have a bit of a different view now of these units. So back to how we perceive the universe. When we look at an object, we perceive light. To put the analogy forward, we may be seeing the reflection of electromagnetic waves we call light from the object. But instead of reflected off an atom's surface, this energy is reflected off the consciousness that composed the atom. Our own conscious focus adds to the thought of what we are looking at, and in combination with these E units emanated from that consciousness, as well as our own, give us the perception of a gestalt of atoms that compose the object. This gestalt was created from a first metaphysical source and combined that source as it is. It is all this combination to give us the perception of an object as it is and all of the combined objects that make up our universe. I can give no guarantees to this theory as being the absolute truth. It is only my present understanding and just a theory. It may be a bit vague to you as I did not go into all the depth to make every nuance clear, but I hope it gives you some food for thought and understanding.